This video is brought to you by MagicJank.com, the spiciest cards for your sauciest decks. Buy and sell Magic the Gathering products and gear today on MagicJank.com.
What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and we are looking at Brothers War today. And not only are we looking at Brothers War today, but we are actually doing a set review. Now, one of the things that I see content creators do all the time that I actually haven't really sat down and just nailed is a full, honest-to-goodness set review. That said, I'm a talker. I know myself. If I review 280 cards and I give each of them the time I want to give them, I'll be on this thing for like 8 hours. So what I decided to do, I am going to give that to you. We are doing it. However, I'm going to be breaking it up by color. So we're going to have, 6 in total. We're going to have white, blue, black, red, and then green. So we're going around the color wheel, starting with white. And we're then also going to have lands and, we're going to do lands and colorless artifacts as well as kind of its own separate thing, and multicolor for the record. That's all going to be bunched up together, but we're going to be doing monocolor cards first, and specifically we're also going to be including artifact cards that are technically colorless, but they have a strong colored identity, like the prototype for prototype creatures, or cards that have like unearth costs that are colored and those kind of things. We're going to be lumping those in with the monocolor, their respective monocolors, just to kind of make things a little easier. So we're going to be doing that. And that way we don't get to the color list and it's like, okay, and this one video is going to be 4 hours or whatever, instead of, and my, mono white video was 20 minutes or whatever. So we're going to be breaking it up like that. That is the plan. And today we are starting with white. Now, the other thing that we're doing when it comes to this particular set review, we are looking at these cards through the perspective of a constructed player who enjoys jank deck brews. If that sounds good to you, stick around, we got a treat. If you are looking for a limited set review, I would highly recommend looking at a number of other creators, such as Hedology or Limited Resources or the like, because they can provide you with detailed breakdowns as it applies to limited. That is not the goal that we are looking at today. We are looking from a constructed perspective with standard in mind specifically. That said, if I see good interactions for commander, I'll call them out. But we're looking at janky brews in standard. That's the goal. So with that, let's get started. At the top, we are looking at the very first mono white card for this set review series, and that is going to be Aeronaut Cavalry. This is a 3/4 for 4 and a white human soldier with flying. When Aeronaut Cavalry enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on another target soldier you control. This looks like a limited card to me. I honestly don't see any good application for this. Yes, a flying 3/4 is worth way more than a grounded 3/4, to be totally fair. And the fact that it enters the battlefield and puts a +1/+1 counter on a thing is nice. However, the fact that it is limited to another target soldier, you can't put the counter on itself if you have no other creatures, that is a massive drawback. So at most, this card is a 3/4. Worst case scenario, you cast this out on an empty board, you get a 3/4 for 5 with flying. That's just a bad rate, and it's not really doing anything unique and special. 1 +1/+1 counter is not worth the 2 mana or whatever, 1 mana. Like a 3/4 for 4 with flying would be okay. At 5, that +1/+1 counter is not worth it. So I don't think this is a particularly good card, no matter how you slice it. So sorry. All right, next up, we've got Airlift Chaplain. This is a 1/1 for 2 and a white with flying. Again, this one I'm human cleric. When Airlift Chaplain enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. You may put a plains card or a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you don't, put a +1/+1 counter on Airlift Chaplain. Now, floor on this thing, you mill yourself, and you get a 2/2 flyer for 3. That's not bad. I like this if you're getting advantage out of cards in your graveyard. If you have other cards that can leverage the graveyard in cool ways, the fact that mono white has a self-mill creature is awesome. And not only is it a self-mill creature, it's a self-mill creature that can help you make sure you hit your land drops, or pull a small creature out of your graveyard into your hand. If you have other cards that are like mana dorks or other small creatures that help set up your strategy, this is great. If you're running reanimator style strategies, you want to fill your graveyard, this puts 3 things in your yard, and if one of those happens to be a small support creature or a land, specifically a plains, then you get it in your hand. Also, note, it says put a plains card or a creature card. There's a word I didn't say there. That's basic. So if you mill a Triumph with this, you get it. You can pull it up. So if your mana base is rather greedy and you have typed planes, lands, that actually makes this even better. So I can actually see this as a pretty decent card. If you're running like a mono white or like even a Boros Reanimator kind of situation, using cards like Invoke Justice, which we have seen in a number of lists already. There are also a couple of other white Reanimator cards that we're going to be getting to a little bit later that could help synergize with this actually in really cool ways. So this is a common. Now, the fact that it costs 3 is a little bit of a bummer. Like, it would be so much better at 2. It's not even funny. But it can still do the job. It does the thing if what you want is to be filling your graveyard in white. So I like it. Pretty decent. All right, next up, we have Ambush Paratrooper. This is a 1/2 flying flash human soldier for 1 and a white. Pay 5, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. This card on its face is not amazing. However, it's not as bad as it might look. Late in the game, having a mana sink like this is usually good in limited. In constructed, unless you're in a situation, like if you're in a commander situation where you can somehow generate infinite mana, then sure, your team gets infinitely large and you could probably win the game with that. Like, that's interesting. If you're working with infinite mana, you can do better than this. But, like, it's fine. Like, I think that mana sink gets much better in constructed. However, unless, of course, all right, I just caught myself. The one situation in which this card is the bomb is if Power Stones are as easy to generate and are as good as Wizard seems to think. If Power Stones become valuable, we need mana sinks in order to leverage all that mana we got lying around and that can't be used to cast non-artifact spells. So as a result, Ambush Paratroopers gives us a place to dump all that mana. That could be really meaningful if you're going wide. So not bad. But the part of this card that actually I find really intriguing is it's a flash soldier with flying. And a 1/2 flying body for 2 is not bad. Like, not amazing, but not bad. And the fact that you can do that at instant speed all of a sudden is excellent. Now, we have a number of other flash soldiers in the format. So we also have, the Cathar Commando, 3/1 for 2 with flash that has a disenchant style effect on it. You've got Resolute Reinforcements, which is the 1/1 that just poops out another 1/1 when it enters. That also has flash. If you're in a situation where you want to be running on your opponent's turn, this is great. Like, we could genuinely be looking at a situation where draw go soldiers is viable because so many soldiers have flash and so many soldier payoffs like have flash. And there's removal, of course, that has flash, or are instants. You know, there are like enchantments that do, you know, that are good removal spells that have flash as well that you could absolutely pair with these. So I'm very intrigued at the idea of brewing flash soldiers. Because we also have the Soldier Lord from Dominator United. And there's also like the White Defiler that can buff your whole team. Or, yeah, no, the White Defiler is the one that creates soldier tokens. And it can make these guys cheaper. So all in all, I think there is something here. I think soldiers actually could become a very real tribe after Brothers War. That has me excited. That has me excited a lot, actually. All right, next up. Calamity's Wake. I love my graveyards. I love them. I hate this card. From the perspective of someone who loves their graveyard. As far as like a card goes, it's actually pretty good. So what does it do? It's an instant for 1 and a white, exile all graveyards. Boo. All right, but then it also says players can't cast non-creature spells this turn. Exile Calamity's Wake. So now, we were just talking about Drago soldiers having a bunch of flash creatures, so this isn't going to do well against that deck. However, if we have a deck that is running a lot of good mid-range value, you do this on their upkeep, blow up their graveyard, potentially get rid of some flashback or unearth threats, and then you limit them to only casting creature spells or activating abilities on their turn. It doesn't, like, fully prevent them from playing their turn, but it does monkey with their plans, and it forces them to play around it, which is pretty cool. The other thing you can do is if you're playing against a controlling opponent, on your turn, depending on what you want to cast, if you have a big creature that you really want to make sure sticks, you can throw this. If they don't counter it, if this resolves, any counter spells they have that aren't incidentally creatures all of a sudden are offline. They cannot cast them. So you try to cast a creature, then boom, it's free and clear to hit the board. That said, Overcharged Amalgam and Urtai are both creatures that can counter spells. Be aware of that. Just a heads up. Those do exist. It is a thing. But if you're going up against just a good old-fashioned, like, you know, control player who's playing a lot of, you know, just kind of traditional counter spells, Calamity's Weight can turn them off for a turn, and that's very meaningful. Also, the fact that it hits all graveyards, you need to be aware of that. Like, don't put this in any deck that is really going to be leveraging your graveyard, because you don't have a choice. It's all of them. They're all gone. So if you're trying to get value out of your graveyard, this is going to be a double-edged sword in a big bad way. But if you don't really care about getting value out of your graveyard and you really want to hose your opponents, this thing could definitely do it. I think it's powerful. I really think it's powerful. I like this card a lot from a pure power levels perspective. And the fact that it's such a powerful hoser is at uncommon is very meaningful. So yeah, I think it's good. All right, next up, Deadly Riposte. This is an instant for 1 and a white. Deadly Riposte deals 3 damage to target tapped creature, and you gain 3 life. This is limited situational removal at its finest. The truth of the matter is, if you have 2 mana at instant speed, there are a bunch of ways, many of which in white, where you can just straight up destroy something, or like, where you can just straight up destroy stuff. As far as removal goes, I don't really like this, unless you're in some kind of life gain scenario. Like if you really need to gain life, I guess this is a way that you could theoretically do that and pick something off, but in general, I don't think this makes the cut. Outside of limited, I can't imagine this seeing any meaningful play. And even within limited, to be fair, you're probably not picking it very highly. So anyway, this is one of those, like, it's fine, I guess, but constructed, you're not gonna play this. And like, don't, but it's a common. It's common removal. That is what it is. All right, next up. Oh yes, it's back, baby. I do not want to live in a world where this card is not legal in Standard. And that card is Disenchant. 1 and a white instant, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Boom. Exactly what we want. I freaking love this thing. This is bread and butter removal. If you are working on a tight budget on Arena and you just want to make sure you have something that can blow something up, honestly, you probably already have 4 of these in your collection right now. It was reprinted in Zendikar Rising, as well as I think a couple of the core sets. So, like, you have Disenchants on your client, almost guaranteed. And if not, they're common wild cards. So pick your favorite art, go nuts. Like, it's just good. It's just good bread and butter. Like I said, I think this is more budget. Like, it's very budget friendly. There are a lot of more targeted removal. That said, we're coming from a Standard that has a lot of value enchantments running around. And Brothers War is going to at least attempt to inject a bunch of value artifacts into the format. Disenchant actually might be positioned really well as just good removal, like good main deck removal that is almost always going to have a good target. I actually wouldn't be surprised. Like right now, Destroy Evil is seeing a ton of play. It is destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater, or destroy target enchantment. It's seeing a ton of play because those 2 things are in just mad demand right now. There's Shell Dread running around, as well as a ton of value enchantments. Disenchant can't deal with Shell Dread, but it has the upside of dealing with artifacts. So it actually could be positioned to be a really good, solid piece of removal in white-based mid-range decks or even control decks. I'm intrigued. I want to see what happens. Also, I just have a soft spot for Disenchant for a number of reasons, actually. One of the early YouTube projects that I did was actually a podcast called the Overthinking MTG Podcast, where I looked at a random Magic card every single day. It has since kind of fallen by the wayside, but it fell victim to pod fade for podcast fans. Anyway, but the very first card we ever hit when I was doing that series was I believe the alpha. No, it was like the revised printing of Disenchant. So I have a soft spot for this. It was a card in alpha. Whenever a card in alpha can still see a meaningful reprint and still be a solid playable card 30 years after its original printing, I love it. Mwah! Chef's kiss. All right, next up. There was a lot of talk about Disenchant. Next up, we got Great Desert Prospector. This is a human artificer, 3/2 for 5, 4 white. When Great Desert Prospector enters the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token for each other creature you control. This is interesting. This looks to me like a fair-ish Dockside Extortionist. Now, it's not as good as Dockside. Absolutely not. Not even close. There is no comparison. If you're not familiar, Dockside Extortionist is a card that is designed for Commander. That it's this little goblin. It only costs 2 for some reason. I think it costs 4. It would still be phenomenal, but it only costs 2. And when it enters the battlefield, you create a treasure token for each artifact your opponents control, which in a 4-person pod is obviously a ton. Now, in this case, Great Desert Prospector costs 5. You're getting Power Stones, which are arguably worse than treasures. But to be honest, that's arguable. And I do believe it is. I think the vast majority of people will tell you the Power Stone tokens are nowhere near as good as treasure. They have a couple points. Treasures create colored mana. That's a big deal. You can also use that mana on anything. Also a very big deal. However, treasure tokens sacrifice upon use, which in some cases is actually great. Like if you're trying to make a fatal push happen, being able to trigger revolt by tapping your mana effectively is fantastic. Outside of that though, the fact that Power Stones, you can just tap to make the mana. You don't sacrifice it. So the next turn you can tap to make more mana. If you are in a situation where you're casting artifact spells, or you have a way to use colorless mana on abilities, Power Stones are actually pretty darn good and arguably better than treasure. So it depends on your deck construction and what you're really looking for. So if you can take advantage of Power Stone tokens, Great Desert Prospector is a great way to put a buttload of Power Stones onto the board very quickly. That's nice. I like that. So that's good. But what are the hoops? You know, when it enters the battlefield, you create a Power Stone token. It does come into the battlefield tapped, but it's for each other creature you control. If you're casting this onto an empty board, you just got a 3/2 for 5 and nothing else. Good work, homie. And I'm being very sarcastic. It's bad work, homie. That is no good. However, if you're in like a rabble-rousing style, stupid go-wide deck, or you're in a situation where you've like animated all your lands or done something crazy, and you have a big board state, this gives you a butt ton of artifacts that you can do stuff with. That's interesting. If you're in a situation where a critical mass of artifacts could go a long, long way, then this could do some cool things. I fully suspect there is a combo deck out there somewhere waiting to take advantage of this alongside a ton of token generators. But in order for that to be effective, there needs to be a couple things going on. We need to have a ton of creatures, so we need to have a ton of token generating creatures. We also need to have a reason to dump a bunch of Power Stones. Like, and this format does not have like a Disciple of the Vault or a Cranial Plating, like the big bomb killer cards that could absolutely destroy your opponent just by having a butt ton of artifacts. There isn't really anything like that here, at least none that I've seen so far. If I'm wrong on that, please leave it in the comments below. Let me know. If you are aware of a great payoff that this can take advantage of, I want to hear it. So what I see there is, you know, I see this as a cool payoff, or I see this as a cool enabler for some kind of combo, but I'm not sure exactly the rest of the pieces of that combo. It's also kind of cool because you can blink it. So if you need a critical mass of Power Stone tokens for something, I don't know exactly what that something is, but whatever that something is, this can get you there, and that's kind of cool. I like that idea. Yeah, being able to blink it does good things. I don't know. I'm gonna tinker with this one. It has me intrigued. To be honest assessment, stepping back, how good is Great Desert Prospector? Probably not very, because it's only a 3/2 for 5. It costs a little bit too much, and you do not get enough of a body. So it's probably very bad, just because 5 mana is not where you want to be casting setup pieces, which is unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. So maybe this is Commander. Like maybe this might be a budget Commander All-Star. You know, that might be where this belongs. I don't think it's going to see any play in Standard, even in a janky brew kind of setup. But I'm intrigued. It's a cool effect. All right, next up, In the Trenches. 1 white. Enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Glorious Anthem. It's like on its face, this is Glorious Anthem. 1 white. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Classic card, does the thing. Cool. Pumps the squad. You can also pay 5 and a white. Exile target non-land permanent you don't control until In the Trenches leaves the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery and only once. So this is a strictly better Glorious Anthem because it's a Glorious Anthem that can become an O-ring later in the game by paying 6. The fact that you have to pay 6, you have to invest 9 mana, and you get 1 Oblivion Ring, and 1 Glorious Anthem. It's not worth it. Like, this is strictly not worth it. Wedding Announcement is 10,000 times better than this. And it's even a delayed Anthem, but it doesn't matter because you're drawing cards or creating tokens off of it. Whereas this, you might be able to pump some mana into it later and remove something. In draft, this is probably fine if you're already in white, but even, to be honest, even in a draft situation, if I open this as my pack 1 pick 1, I'm probably not taking it. Depending on what else, if the rest of the pack is a total dud, it's like, sure, I'll take the Mythic and I guess roll the dice. But like, I don't think this card is very good. I just don't think it's very good at all. I think it is a strictly better Glorious. Like we were talking earlier, I was gushing earlier about how Disenchant is still a rock solid playable utility card. Glorious Anthem is not. And that kind of sucks because it's a classic card. But at the same time, we have to address it. We have to acknowledge what it is. And I don't think this card is very good anymore. It's just not. I mean, maybe in that like Go White Soldier deck, if you're like really torn and like really stuck on 3-drops. But even so, like the problem with Anthems is that in aggressive decks, you want to be playing creatures and adding power to the board. If you take your turn 3, effectively, if you take it off to buff your team, even if you hit a 1 and a 2-drop creature, so you have multiple creatures on board, you hit in the trenches, you're able to get in for some additional damage that turn, which is great. You've affected the board, cool, you're doing the thing. Like, that's good. However, then if your opponent wipes the board, in the trenches is still there, sure, but what's it accomplishing? Well, nothing. And that's kind of the issue. And whereas if you had another 3-drop creature, if you had something that could mold your hand, I don't know. There's like, I feel like there are better impacts to the game than Anthems these days. Actually, come to think of it, if I'm in like Selesnya, I'd rather be playing King Darien in the situation because it's a buff, but he has a mana ability that you can dump stuff into to create tokens, and I believe draw cards. Anyway, yeah, no, but it also. You know, it can also be used to protect your tokens from sweepers and whatnot. So, I don't know. I don't think this card has it. I'm not impressed at all. If we were in a scenario where Devotion mattered, if we were back in Theros, then the double white is good, but outside of that, like in Commander decks, if you really, really want as many Anthem effects as you can get, I bet you're going to be able to get this on the cheap, because I don't think it's going to see play anywhere. All right, next up, we have Kayla's Command. This is a sorcerer for 1 white. Choose to create a 2/2 colorless construct artifact creature token. Put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. It gains double strike until end of turn. Search your library for a basic playing card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. You gain 2 life and scry 2. Like, on its face, this card looks fine when you first read it. There is one glaring flaw with this thing. And when I say glaring flaw, I mean like in your face, massive issue. And it's not the artwork. The artwork's gorgeous, by the way. All the commands. That actually, you know, I'm gonna throw out a general hot take on the commands of this set. I am gonna cover each one of them individually as we go through the series. And yeah, Kayla's command specifically, the fact that it's not an instant, huge problem. These commands in general in this set, they're all bad. They're all very, very bad. There's only one that I think is even playable. And that is, that's actually Mishra's command, the red one. I think that one is like, okay. But all the other ones are dog water. I think they cost too much. The impacts are not great enough for what you pay. And like in this case, Kayla's command is a sorcery. Like the only mode on this that I think is even remotely okay is that put a +1/+1 counter on a creature control, it gains double strike until end of turn. If you were able to do that at instant speed so you could make sure the unblocked creature gets the double strike and get him for mad damage, that would rock. I would be all for that. But instead, unless you're putting it on an unblockable creature or a trampler, you're probably just going to get chump blocks and it's going to mean nothing. So, like, that sucks. You know, like, so you can create a construct, you get a 2/2 for 3, you can put a counter on it, it gains double strike, but it doesn't have haste, so that's not going to matter. You can gain 2 life, scry 2, like... Scry is meaningful. The Scry 2 is meaningful, and the 2 life might be the difference between life or death in certain situations, but I'm not banking on getting into those situations enough to put this card in my deck. Like, I don't like it. I just don't like it. All right. Next up, Kayla's Reconstruction. This is X, white, white, white. Sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put up to X artifact and or creature cards with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So, I love the idea of this. I love the idea of this a lot. Now, drawback. It's an X. You cannot use Power Stone mana on it, which sucks. I want to jam so much mana into this. It is absurd. Because, I mean, if you hit, like, I mean, best case scenario, you pump 7 mana into that X. You pay 10 for this. Look, it's 7 cards in your library. You can put all 7 of them if they're artifacts or creatures that hit this parameter. Now, chance of that happening, stupid low. Stupid low. Honestly, if you're hitting this for 6, if you're paying 6 or 7 for this, so you can grab 3 or 4 creatures, you're getting pretty good value. And yeah, and more importantly, like, yes, you are digging and you are putting so these creatures onto the battlefield, which is great. But like, you need to build your deck around this. And so, but the best part is you're spending 1 card and you're potentially getting like 2 or 3. Like, I mean, potentially more if you're able, if you have the mana line around. If you can get 4 or 5 off this, good lord, you're doing the thing. But this is a specific build around. I do not believe this is a card that you can just jam 4 of in white decks and just like spin the wheel and hope for the best. But if you're running a deck that is specifically using low-cost creatures already, especially like low-cost ETB creatures or creatures that have some kind of utility value, your spirited companions, your extraction specialists, your intrepid adversaries, if you're using those kind of cards, all of a sudden this becomes fantastic as like a 2 of. Like, I still don't want to jam 4 of these because in a deck like that, you kind of want to end the game by getting aggressive and really beating your opponent down pretty fast. And if you're beating your opponent down fast enough, you're never going to have mana to actually cast this thing. So if you have too many of them in the deck, they're going to end up being dead cards in your hand that could have been cheap creatures that you could have been using to help win the game. So that's, you know, that's kind of the downside of this. Now, that said, in sideboards of, you know, aggro decks like that are leveraging small creatures for value, in a sideboard situation for something like that could be really good, because if you're going up against a controlling deck that is able to consistently wipe your board, whether that's, you know, your Urza decks running cards like Path of Peril, your domain decks running Drag to the Bottom, your white decks running Depopulate, whatever it might be that you're going up against that is like consistent, that is comfortably able to wipe the board the moment you set up, this gives you an opportunity to rebuild quickly. 1 turn, dump all your mana into it, drop 3 things on the board, pass, you're good to, you're ready to rock and roll for next turn. Pretty darn good. This looks to me like a massive collective company. This could be a huge collected company if you've got the mana for it. And even if you don't, for 4, 3 of which is white, look at the top 7 cards of your library, put 1 artifact or creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield, put the rest at the bottom of your library in a random order. Not amazing. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. You know? And if you can put 2 into it, 5 mana. I mean, actually, that's the story right there. 5 mana, you get a collected company at sorcery speed. Coco's still better. Don't get me. I'm not trying to say that Coco is now obsolete because Kayla's Reconstruction's here. No. Not by a long shot. Sorcery versus instant makes a massive difference. But mono white now has a Coco effect in non-alchemy standard. That's neat. I'll take that. I like it. Anyway, so I think this is a cool card. I think it's neat. I think in the right style of deck that is low to the ground, efficient creatures that, especially if they're like snowballing with multiples, this card could be really good. Just really good. As like a solid 2, maybe even 3 of in those decks, to be honest, now that I think about it. So the more I look at it, the more I read it, the more I like it. All right, next up, we have Lay Down Arms. Sorcery for 1 white. Exile target creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of planes you control. Its controller gains 3 life. If you're in a situation where your mana base is predominantly made up of planes, whether you're in mono white or whether you're in like a 2-color situation, where you're leveraging, planes typed cards, whether those are the Triomes or the Dominator United tap lands that have types, whatever it may be. Later on, has an opportunity to actually be pretty good. Like mono white, this actually is just solid removal. Like just run it, baby, because like you're gonna be able to hit most. Like in mono white, you're gonna be able to kill most things on curve, and that's rad. Now, downside, it's 1 mana removal. However, if you are mana screwed, not only will you not have the mana in your on your mana base or on the board to cast the spells in your hand that actually progress you closer to your strategy that could hopefully win you the game, you also will not be able to cast Lay Down Arms meaningfully because you don't have the planes online. So you can't target big creatures with this. So that would suck. That's big suck, to be fair. But being able to hit like Tenacious Underdog on turn 2, that's pretty sweet. And it exiles, it gets it gone. Just now, your opponent gains 3 life. That's not great. That is a meaningful downside. But all the same, it is removal for 1 mana that exiles something and could potentially later in the game exile things that are very large. A lot of people are drawing the comparison to Swords to Plowshares, which is fair. That is an apt comparison. Swords is an instant speed, and it can hit any creature regardless of the mana base. But the opponent has the upside of potentially gaining a lot more life. But I still prefer Swords. But at the same time, they would never print. I don't believe they will ever reprint Swords to Plowshares into Standard. At least at any time, unless their design philosophy changes dramatically. And with what Standard looks like, I don't think we're going to see Swords or Path to Exile or that style effect for a long time. I think this is probably the closest we're going to get. It is cheap. You can multi-spell later in the game very easily with it, but you are limited to your mana base with how, the mana base needs to be in good shape in order for the card to be effective. And I think that's interesting. Like, I like it in general. I think it's just a really good card. Mono white decks want to run this. It's that simple. And in an aggressive mono white deck, this is actually fantastic. Granted, you don't want to be giving your opponent life in aggressive decks, but if your creatures are big enough, being able to get a pesky blocker out of the way for one, still cast multiple, other spells that turn that open things up, and I don't know, like it could be quite strong. So I don't know. I think the card's good. Maybe not amazing, but pretty darn good. All right, next up. We have Lauren of the Third Path. This is a legendary creature, human artificer, 2/1 for 2 and a white with Vigilante. When Lauren of the Third Path enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. Tap, you and target opponent each draw a card. I love this. Love it. Strap me in. This is going to be a historic brawl commander. This is going to be, I'm going to build around this. Absolutely, 100% all day, every day, no question. I'm going to be building around this. There's going to be an Urza deck. There's going to be an Urza deck. I don't know if it's going to be like a meta, per se, but I know I'm going to build it. That is Lauren of the Third Path and Sheoldred. That tap target opponent, you and target opponent each draw a card. If Sheoldred's online, that domes your opponent for 2, you gain 2 life. That's pretty great. You can also activate that at instant speed. Go nuts, have fun. And then, and on top of that, it's a mono white Reclamation Sage. When it enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. It blows up a pesky permanent upon entering. Like I was gushing about Disenchant earlier. It was 1 and a white for that effect at instant speed. This is sorcery speed, but you also get a 2/1 vigilant body for only 1 additional mana with that tap ability. I think this is great. Like, I love this card. Sign me up. I am in. Let's go. Do I think it's amazing? Probably not. Do I think it's going to see some competitive play, maybe in sideboards or something? Maybe. The 1 toughness is a major knock against it. Don't get me wrong. That is a huge drawback. But I think it's cool. Also, the fact that it's you and target opponent. Now, on Arena, in Standard, those kind of formats where it's 1v1, that's you and your opponent draw a card. Okay. Not amazing. Fine. It's okay. It does the job. In Commander, or any other multiplayer format, all of a sudden, you can do some table politics. Who would like a card this turn? Great. If you don't attack me or if you don't target me with that thing you've got, I'll give you a card this turn. Like that kind of stuff is fun and can go a long way. Also, it's really nice in Commander when one person's getting mana screwed to be able to just give them a card and then draw a card yourself. You know, it gets some goodwill at the table. Make sure your friends are having a good time. Like, I think this card's great. Absolutely love it. All right. Next up, Lauren, Disciple of History. So this is another take on the same character, I believe. 3 and a white for 3/3. Whenever Lauren, Disciple of History, or another legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Now, if you are rocking legendary creatures, and right now there are legendary creature decks running around, special thanks to Joda, this is going to be really good. If you have artifacts that are finding their way to your graveyard in one way or another, if you're sacrificing artifacts, if you are reanimating artifacts, obviously you're going to be filling your graveyard with stuff in one way or another. So if you're milling artifacts, this gets them back into your hand. Dope. I love that. So yeah, it's just good in that case. So it's interesting. Our last Lauren was like kind of a Rec Sage. This is kind of an Eternal Witness, but not really. I mean, it costs 4, not 3, and it is limited on what you can grab. It is limited to artifacts. So, okay, Rec Sage is a little aggressive of a comparison. Or no, sorry, Eternal Witness is I'm being a little generous with that comparison. But all the same, I think this is a cool card. And it's upon any ETB for legendary creatures under your control. So that can be a lot of things. Like, there's a lot of legendary creatures running around out there right now. And Lauren helps you find them. So I think this card's cool. I don't know what else to say. It's cool. It does good things. All right, next up, we have Lauren's Escape. This is an instant for 1. Target artifact or creature gains hexproof and indestructibility till end of turn. Scry 1. Dope. Cool, moving on. No, I'm kidding. This is a good card. The fact that it's only 1 is fantastic because you can save any artifact or creature. It's hexproof or indestructible. So this is a white Tamiyo Safekeeping. Now, Tamiyo Safekeeping can be hit any permanent. If your opponent's like going after one of your lands, I can say no. This is limited to artifacts or creatures, which is a little bit of a bummer. But if you have some kind of combo engine, or if you're in one of those decks where you're running like Joda out for any reason, and or you have some big crazy payoff, this is a great way to prevent your opponent from killing it. Like, for example, if you have a Rafine down, for example, Rafine is a great case of a creature that you want to stay alive no matter what. A lot of the time, your opponent will target, your Rafine with a spell, pay the 1 ward. You can follow that up with Lauren's Escape. Let them pay the ward, let them go through all the motions, and then hit this. Give your Rafine hexproof, the spell fizzles, life is gravy, you're doing the thing. And the Scry 1 is a meaningful upside as well. Being able to tee up the top of your deck is a big deal. It can be anyway, especially if it's late in the game and you need to draw a particular answer in a particular situation. Also, Delver of Secrets is currently legal. Now, there is already a mono blue Delver list that is kind of making the rounds. You see it around quite a bit. Special thanks to cards like Haughty Djinn and even Tolarian Terror. They're just good payoffs for that. One of the things that you will see in those decks a lot are cards like Otherworldly Gaze, or anything that can kind of fix the top of the library. Because with Delver, if you get to your upkeep and you have an instant or sorcery on the top, it flips into the Insectile Aberration. That's a big deal. That's where you want that card to be. If you cannot flip a Delver, it is a 1/1 for 1. That is terrible. Meanwhile, if you do flip it, it's a 3/2 flyer for 1, which is freaking awesome. And she's playing Legacy for a reason. So, Lauren's Escape, if you want to be running like an Azorius Delver or like a Jeskai Delver for one reason or another, Lauren's Escape is a great way to protect the Delver later in the game as you're trying to chip in for those final points of damage and win the freaking thing. It also gives you that scry so you can fix the top of your library and flip whatever Delvers you got lying around. So that's a situation where I can see this being useful, and it's protection. Protection spells are good. And it's a common, which is exactly where you want it to be. So, good stuff. Next up, Mass Production. 5 and a white for a sorcery. Create 4 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens. I want this to be an instant so freaking bad. As it stands, this might see play in limited, because 4 bodies is a lot of bodies, but 6 mana is a lot of mana. Now, the fact that it's splashable is nice. It only costs you 1 white. The other 5 is generic. But I'm not impressed. Now, the fact that it produces soldier artifact creature tokens is kind of nice. If you have soldier synergies, it feeds those. If you have artifact synergies, it feeds those. So you're kind of double dipping on your value, which does give this card some flexibility in what kind of decks might want it. But at the end of the day, 6 mana for 4 1/1s, you got to be getting a lot of crazy synergies for this to be worth it. And to be honest, I don't think it is. I don't think this card's particularly good. To be honest, even in, like, if you're doing a limited soldier deck, it might be good. If you're doing limited soldiers, that actually might be exactly where you want it. Because then you get all the soldier synergies. You get 4 of them at once. I mean, there's 4 bodies off 1 card. Like, if you have a soldier lord down, they all come in as 2/2s, that's pretty great. Like, all right, you know, but all in all, I think the card's probably a little too expensive and a little too narrow. All right, next up, Meticulous Excavation. This is an enchantment for 1 white. Pay 2 and a white, return target permanent you control to its owner's hand. If it has Unearth, instead exile it, then return that card to its owner's hand. Activate only during your turn. So I really dislike the fact that you have to activate it during your turn. That kind of sucks. If you could activate this at instant, well, you can activate it at instant speed, but only on your turn. So if you're attacking with something and your opponent blocks in a way that would kill it, you can't just pay 3 and bounce it back to your hand rather than let it die. That's cool. If you're blocking, however, this is no good. This doesn't help you, I should say. But in short, like, this is actually a really cool effect. I like this card a lot. Now, this is not Teleportation Circle. Like, Teleportation Circle rotated out recently out of Standard, and it was a card that just lets you blink something every single turn, and you would get ETB effects, and it was pretty rad. This doesn't quite do that for you, so I don't love that. I think this is really going to be valuable if you are leveraging Unearth. Because Unearth says that once you unearth a creature onto the battlefield, if it were to die or if it were to leave the battlefield in any way, it goes to exile instead. So if you bounce a creature with Unearth, if you sacrifice a creature with Unearth, if, you know, whatever, however a creature with Unearth leaves the battlefield, it just poofs and is gone forever. Meticulous Excavation, however, specifically says you exile it first and then out of exile return it to your hand. So as a direct result, it gets around that clause and you get to keep unearthed creatures around. If you're building a full-on, not messing around, all-in unearthed deck, Meticulous Excavation could be a really cool addition. Which is kind of weird because most of the unearthed creatures, if I'm not mistaken, are in Rakdos. But I believe there's some in all of the colors, but like Mishra's colors are definitely Rakdos. Actually, you know, like his colors are, yeah, like Rakdos or Grixis, like leaning into blue a little bit. But in any event, like, white doesn't really fit. White is definitely Urza's territory. So the fact that this helps you with unearthed creatures is kind of weird. A little bit. The other thing, though, that I really like about this card, it only costs 1. That's big time. The fact that it only costs 1 to establish it on the field. It costs 1 and a card, but it only costs 1. And your opponent might actually get worried about this because of its potential value later in the game, and as a result, target it with removal. And if they burn removal on this rather than like your Fable of the Mirror Breaker or your Wedding Announcement, that's pretty great, and you're probably going to win that game. Well, you have a leg up. That gives you good advantage in that situation. So, in that case, I think it's pretty decent. Now, the place I really want to take advantage of this is in any kind of format where you can make activated abilities cheaper. That's where stuff gets interesting. I want to run this alongside Zerda, the Dawnwaker. It is a little fox that says all your activated abilities cost 2 less. It cannot make it cost 0. So, this would make it so 1 white, and you bounce a permanent to its owner's hand. You bounce a permanent you control to its owner's hand. That's incredibly powerful because it's any permanent. Like, any permanent. Like, think about this. Like, if it only costs 1 to do that, if you have reduced the activation cost of this, then all of a sudden you have cards, you have ETB creatures or you know, a land with an end of the battlefield ability. You can bounce this. You can actually use it right now. The channel lands from Kamigawa are live. You can use this to bounce one of the Kamigawa channel lands back to your hand. Like, let's say you're in Selesnya. Early in the game, you play a Besaijo so you have your green mana source so you can curve out and do your thing. It's now late in the game. You've got 6-7 land down. You're doing fine. Your opponent just plays an Arcane Bombardment. Well, crap. Goes to your turn. You pay 3 or pay 1 if you're in a situation where you got Zerda or something like that online. In any event, you pay the activation, bounce Besaijo back to your hand. You can even tap Besaijo for 1 of the mana for this. It would be green, but that's fine. You tap the Poseidon in addition to 2 other lands, bounce it back to your hand, and then cast it, blow up their Arcane Bombardment. That was your land that just did that for you. Like, this card gives you flexibility, and that's what I like about it. So I think it's neat. I think this is a really cool design, and I'm going to try to find ways to take advantage of it, because I think there are options. Now, Zerda would be like Explorer or Historic. You wouldn't be able to run it in Standard because it has rotated out like a while ago now, but all the same. Cool card. I like this card a lot, actually. It reminds me very much of Crystal Shard. Here, let's take a second to go on a little journey down memory lane. Crystal Shard, artifact from Mirrodin for 3. Now, the excavation only costs 1. And you can pay 3 or a blue, tap, return target creature to its owner's hand unless its controller pays 1. If your opponent taps out, you can bounce their biggest threat, which is super rude. But if they don't, and you're not worried about that, you can target your own stuff. You can target your own creature, and you'll get, if you were to do it, I mean, this card isn't on Arena, but if it were to be, you'd get that little, like, pop-up. Would you like to pay the 1? It's like, decline. Boop, bounces right back to your hand. 1 blue, return target creature you control to its owner's hand. This only costs 1 to play, but it costs 3 to activate, and it's return target permanent you control to its owner's hand. So, it's cool. I think this is a neat card. I think it's a neat card that has good implications. Anyway. We've talked enough about that. Next up, Military Discipline. Aura for 1 with Flash. Enchant creature. When Military Discipline enters the battlefield, enchant a creature gains first strike until end of turn. Enchant a creature gets +1/+0. This is the kind of combat trick I am very interested in. First strike is highly underrated, and on top of that, a lot of people don't see it coming. I think you will be able to get people with this a lot. If you're in like a mid-range situation or an aggro situation, this is definitely the kind of trick I want to be able to pull on my opponent. Being able to give first strike and instant speed is rad. However, I'm not going to be running this particular card. This particular card, you do not get enough value to merit a slot in the deck. That is the only downside. The effect of this is really, really cool. In Limited, this is the kind of trick I'm interested in because it has a permanent effect on the game in that the creature gets +1/+0. That's neat. It gets first strike the 1 turn, where it's going to be relevant, where you're probably going to be able to eat something, and put yourself in a position where your opponent thought they were going to get a favorable block, and instead they thought they were going to get favorable block or maybe a trade, and all of a sudden they're getting blown out. Like, that's great. That's what you want to see. However, the Wandering Emperor still exists, and Wandering Emperor provides this exact same effect. Now, it costs 4 mana, but there's way more flexibility in that card. Granted, we're comparing a rare Planeswalker to a common aura. That is apples and dogs. It's like that is, we're not even fruits anymore. These are so disparate to be comparing. But the fact that Military Discipline evokes it brings me to the Wandering Emperor, tells you that this effect can be very good, because it can. Like, end of the day, first strike and instant speed is no joke. I can't imagine actually playing this unless I'm in a situation where auras matter. If I want to be putting a ton of auras on stuff, this is gonna be really good. Actually, let me see. If I'm in a situation where I'm running like Ivy Gleeful Spell Thief, this actually could be quite strong. Because if I have Ivy alongside something else, I can target something else, and then one of these also staples onto Ivy. Power is buffed. They both have first strike till end of turn. On the attack, okay, something there. Also, if I'm running Vesuvan Duplimancy, combat tricks like this become very good. So if you're in like a Bant Ivy's Duplimancy situation, which is a style of deck I highly recommend, it is stupid fun when it works. This kind of card actually could work quite nicely. You get a good, meaningful combat trick. You also get, the additional synergies. That could be quite strong. So, also in any deck with Light Paws. Light Paws wants to have a lot of cheap auras that have different names. So Military Discipline as like a one-of in Light Paws could be incredibly powerful. So that's something to think about too. All right, next up. Myrel, Shield of Argive. Legendary creature, human soldier, 3/4 for 3 and a white. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. Whenever Myrel, Shield of Argive attacks, create X, 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. Incredible. This card is straight up incredible. If your opponent has an instant speed interaction, tough freaking luck. It's not gonna work. None of it. If your opponent has stuff they want to do on your end step, too damn bad. This is incredible. The only card, actually no, I was just thinking the only card they can really get around this is Wandering Emperor, but no, they can't even do that because they can't cast spells. So no, like, Myrel just shuts off your opponent on your turn. Like, not completely, like there are, like, they can channel or cycle or that kind of thing, for example. Oh no, wait a minute. They can still channel, I believe, because those are activated abilities of cards in hand, so they don't have those permanent types. I believe that's how that works. So, like, but that, aside from that, if they're not channeling or cycling, they can't do much of anything. So they are shut down pretty darn hard. And on top of that, if you have multiple soldiers, whenever you attack with Myrel, you get even more soldiers. It's like rabble-rousing on a body. And if you have soldier synergies, good lord! Like, this is insane. This is insane! Straight up. If you are in the soldier deck, we were talking about soldiers doing fun stuff earlier. If you're in that style of deck, this is a slam dunk home run. If you're going up against this card, kill it immediately with fire. And remember, you have to do it on your turn, because, like, this thing is going to run you over. Straight up, it's just going to run you over. Additionally, you create the colorless soldier artifact creature tokens based on the number of soldiers you control, not the number of soldiers that are attacking. Keep that in mind. You do not have to attack with a whole team in order to get this bonus. You only need to attack with Myrel. So, I would highly recommend you do something to protect Myrel. You can have, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about, like, instant speed protection spells. Being able to give Myrel, like, you know, hexproof and indestructible is good for sure. But because they have to attack, you need to be sure to protect them in combat. So I would highly recommend ways to make them unblockable. Like, the first thing that I think of is Security Breach from the Streets of New Capenna, where if you only attack with the one creature, it becomes unblockable, and then when it deals damage, it connives. Like, something like that could be kind of stupid with this, if I'm honest. Because you could just attack with Myrel, create a whole bunch of, like, just attack with Myrel, get in for a little bit of damage, get your connive on, and upon the attack trigger, you create a bunch of stuff, you create a bunch of soldiers, and then each turn, you just multiply the number of soldiers you have, and then eventually you swing with the whole team and win the game. To be honest, you probably only need to wait 1, maybe 2 turns before delivering the kill shot. So I think this card is just really good. You need to protect it. You need to protect it, but it also protects itself, kind of. Like, if your opponent has instant speed kill spells as their response, you're going to get at least 1 turn. That's nice. And then you're forcing them to play on their turn, which is exactly what you want. So, yeah, I like this card a lot. Straight up, I enjoy it. All right, next up, Phalanx Vanguard. Human soldier 2/2 for 1 and a white with Vigilante. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield and under your control, Phalanx Vanguard gets +1/+0 until end of turn. I don't think this card's particularly good. However, 2/2 Vigilance for 2 is not a bad rate. It's also a soldier. So, if you're in a situation where you have other synergies, or you have the ability to dump a bunch of artifacts on the battlefield at once, this is all of a sudden really good. Well, Myrel, we were just looking at, creates artifact soldiers upon attack. As a direct result, Phalanx Vanguard has an opportunity to get stupid big on that attack. Stupid big. Like, think about it. If you attack with Phalanx Vanguard and Myrel, and you have, like, 2 other soldiers lying back, Myrel creates, what, 4 tokens. This gives +4/+0. The next turn, that doubles. Like, if Phalanx Vanguard survives. Not a given, but very strong. I think Phalanx Vanguard, when combined with other, and it also has Vigilance, so you can theoretically block with it too. Good stuff. If Phalanx Vanguard, if you can create a critical mass of tokens, this is going to be very strong. I think it's very strong. Artifacts ETB, I wish it was +1/+1. Like, I wish it was like full-on artifact prowess, but it's not. It's just the power bonus. I'm sure that was intentional, because I think there would be ways to break this. The other thing that I would highly recommend you consider is combining this with fling effects. Being able to sacrifice it in the post-combat main phase if it survives combat, when it has those big buffs, when it is like an 8/2 or a 10/2. Casting a card like Fling that just sends it directly into your opponent's face and deals 10 damage could go a long way. Or Ziatora. Putting Ziatora. Now, you'd need at least 4 colors to do that, but I think the possibility is there, and it's kind of neat. So, cool card. I like it. All right, next up, Power Stone Engineer. This is a 2/1 human artificer for 1 and a white. When it dies, create a tap Power Stone token. It's fine. This is fine. I don't think it's amazing. I don't think it's going to set the world on fire. But I think it is acceptable. In draft, it's not bad. 2/1 for 2 is okay. Like the stats aren't amazing, but meh. It's funny, a 2/1 for 2 feels okay, because it can at least trade up with 2 toughness creatures. Like, meanwhile, like, a 3/2 for 3 feels really bad unless it has some other really good effect on it. I find that funny. Like, the cheaper the creature, the less you're worried about the power disparity. But, in any event, I don't think this card's particularly good. It's not a soldier. It is a human, so if you care about human synergies, if you're running, like, Sigarda or that kind of thing, it could be fine. But I don't know how many decks... Or I don't know if a deck that cares about humans and artifacts enough to care about Power Stones. I don't think this is where it's at. So unless you're doing some kind of, like, maybe some kind of aristocrat situation where you're really enjoying those death triggers and you're using those to create incremental value to some big payoff, maybe, like, you can use this. If you're in Mardu, you can use this to, like, casualty Ob Nixilis, get a tap Power Stone token, and get 2 Planeswalkers on the board. Like, that's fine, but again, I don't know. I don't think this card is particularly great. But it's also a common. It's like bread and butter utility common. But I'm probably not running this. Yeah, I'm probably not running this guy anywhere. All right, next up. Prison Sentence. Rad artwork. Just throwing that right at the top. The artwork, for if you're just listening, the artwork is depicting a person in a prison cell wearing tattered rags, and they're kind of in the back. Their face is covered in shadow, but their body is illuminated with light that is broken up by the shadow of prison bars. And there's also a shadow of what appears to be a lion or some other large beast kind of like looming over, presumably on the opposite ends of the bars, looking at him. It's really cool. Definitely check it out. Prison Sentence. Now, it's an aura at common for 3, which means it probably sucks. Let's read it and see. Enchant creature. When Prison Sentence enters the battlefield, scry 2. Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. This is fine. Like, it's an arrest style piece of removal, which is basically just kind of a souped up pacifism, which is all right. Like, being able to get really nasty activated abilities or nasty blockers or attackers off the field is relevant. But the problem is it doesn't get it off the field. So if they have any kind of enchantment removal, they can just pop this and keep swinging, which is not great. The other thing is they still have the body to work with. So if they have any kind of clone effects, if they have any kind of, sacrifice effects, like if there's a creature that has this on it, you can sacrifice it for value to do other things. That doesn't feel good. You don't like that. So this is removal. This is a style of removal that's been around the game forever that is interesting, and like it's good in like starter decks as a way of kind of showing people how to play the game. But the problem is, like, aura downsides go both ways. Offensive auras have the 2-for-1 problem. Defensive auras absolutely have the same kind of thing. Like, it's just limited in how good it can be. So, anyway, next up, Recommission. This kind of thing is my jam. Sorcery, 1 or white. Return target artifact or creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the, wait for it, battlefield. If a creature enters the battlefield this way, it enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And it's a common for 2. Sign me up. This is exactly what I'm talking about. If you're in a situation where you're running like the Kayla's, what are the Kayla's tactics or the reconfiguration, the like big Coco, if you're in a deck like that where you have a lot of cheap creatures that are running around just being cheap creatures, Recommission just gives them back to you and they come back bigger. This is fantastic. If your board gets wiped, you can recommission an extraction specialist that grabs a spirited companion. Like, that's just one example of some of the dumb stuff you can do with this card, and I absolutely love it. Tiny reanimation spells like this are sweet. Additionally, I'm just gonna say it, Abzan Greasefang is already a thing in Explorer. It is kind of the thing in Explorer. It's a very powerful deck, with good reason. It is currently running Can't Stay Away, which is a similar effect, but this is just strictly better, and it's easier to cast. So, yeah, that's the thing. You can reanimate a Greasefang with this. Just gonna put that out there. Do with that what you will. Anyway, I think this card rules. It's very simple, very straightforward. It's a powerful utility piece in the right style of deck, especially if you are like doing aristocratic stuff. Like if you have like an Ellis Ilkor kind of situation where you're doing like, where you're sacrificing things like small creatures for value or small artifacts for value, being able to pull them back with recommission is dope. And it's a common for 2. I love it. Absolutely love it. All right, next up, we have another bomb card at a lower rarity, this time uncommon, Recruitment Officer. This is one of the first cards that they showed from the set when they gave us kind of our first drip like 2 months ago or whatever that was. And it's great. 2/1, 4/1 human soldier. Pay 3 and a white. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. It is a Savannah Lions that can draw you cards. Let me repeat that. This is a Savannah Lions that can draw you cards. And it has 2 relevant creature types in human and soldier. Fantastic. This card is going to see all kinds of play. Every aggressive deck that has white in it is going to want this card. Pure and simple. The other thing I did, recommission. The other thing I forgot to mention, it can reanimate Rafine. It can reanimate Rafine, and Rafine enters the battlefield outside of cut down range if you do that. Just keep that in mind. So, Recruitment Officer, you can also pay 4 and grab a Rafine off the top. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. That's the thing you'll be able to do in standard. So I think the Esper mid-range decks right now, there will be builds that use the Recruitment Officer, I believe. Because it provides early pressure, your opponent has to answer it, and if they spend removal on this, that's more removal that's not going to be hitting your Rafine or T-Dog or any other threats that you're going to be playing later in the game. Yeah, if you're playing an aggressive deck, or even if you're just playing a deck that wants to be attacking with some regularity throughout the game, Recruitment Officer absolutely fits. This card rules. All right, next up, Repair and Recharge. Wizards, you know how to tug at my heartstrings, and you're doing it again. Repair and Recharge, 3 white sorcery. Return target artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Create a tapped Power Stone token. I love this. Now, we already have Invoke Justice. Invoke Justice can grab any permanent. And it buffs the entire team when you reanimate something. So that's fantastic because you can obviously reanimate large creatures and things like that. Repair and Recharge cannot grab a creature unless the creature also happens to be one of these other types. So you can grab big artifact creatures, you can grab big enchantment creatures, or even small ones for that matter. But you can't just grab like a Titan of Industry with this, which is a little bit of a bummer because reanimating Titan of Industry freaking rules. Repair and Recharge isn't going to get you there. However, you can grab cards like Phyrexian Portal, or the Flesh Gorger, or these other gigantic artifacts from Brothers War that are coming in. Those are all on the docket. There's also a couple, there's a blue enchantment, like one with the multiverse, I think it is. That is like kind of Omniscience and Future Sight like smashed together. You can pull that up with Repair and Recharge. So there are going to be plenty of decks, and I highly encourage you to try building them yourself because they're going to be fun, where you are milling cards and discarding cards using Connive and blood tokens and that kind of thing to fill your graveyard up with these gigantic artifacts. The Portal of Phyrexia, the Flesh Gorger. I believe there's a 10/10 common reconfigure creature. Like, you can do that kind of thing. Put these gigantic powerhouse artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers into your yard, and then pull them up on turn 5 or even turn 4 if you have any kind of ramp situation. Like, this is good. Like, this is really good. Like, this card is going to see a lot of play, I think. And actually, you know what? I know it's going to see some play because I'm playing it. Whether you do or not, whether other people do or not, I don't know, but I'm playing this thing. I love it. All right, next up, Siege Veteran. Creature, human soldier. We got more soldiers. You love to see it. 2 and a white for a 2/2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Whenever another non-token soldier you control dies, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. Now, that soldier deck we've been talking about, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. Straight up. We have seen Luminarch Aspirant be a massive player in various formats. It is a phenomenal card. It is one of the best aggressive 2-drops that have ever been printed. Now, Siege Veteran is not quite as good because it costs 3 rather than 2. That is a big deal and a big difference. However, it has the same ability. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. it could even target itself if you don't have anything else. But wait, there's more. Whenever another soldier, non-token soldier you control dies, you whip up a 1/1 soldier artifact. So you're pumping out additional soldiers. If you have soldier lords, if you have soldier synergies, great. If you have artifact synergies, great. We've even seen a number of soldiers in this set that care about artifacts. This is it, man. This thing is fantastic. In that kind of situation, if you are in the soldier tribal deck, this thing is awesome. If you are not in the soldier tribal deck and you're in an aggressive white deck, this is probably still pretty good because of that first ability. And to be honest, if you're in an aggressive white deck, you probably have other creatures that are incidentally soldiers. So you're probably still getting some of those benefits, even if the deck isn't dedicated to be a soldier deck. But I think this card's great. Straight up, I just think this card's great. If you're in humans, if you're in soldiers, you probably want this. Outside of those, I don't know, but it's good. It's good. All right, next up, Soul Partition. Man, I do not want a partition in my soul. That sounds like a bad idea. I want my soul to be cohesive, please and thank you. It is a 1 and a white instant exile target non-land permanent. Yeah, no, I didn't think I liked that. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell cast by an opponent this way costs 2 more to cast. This is similar to Divine Purge. If you're not familiar with Divine Purge, I envy you. Divine Purge is a board sweeper that effectively does this in alchemy. It is an alchemy card that basically like hinders you, but it does so by adding a perpetual cost to the card, which is like infinitely worse than this thing. Infinitely worse. But we don't need to go into that here. The way that this works, though, it buys you time. And the fact that you can hit it at an instant speed is awesome. Now, given how great Enter the Battlefield triggers are right now, I don't love this. I really don't love this. Because cards with Enter the Battlefield triggers are you're gonna be able to re-trigger them with this. So, like, worst case scenario, you hit like an Aether Channeler with this. It's like, yeah, it's a 2-1 for 3. All of a sudden, I can pay 5 and still get the benefit again. Like, all right, I'm not mad at that. Because the ETB is really what I wanted to get out of it anyway. So you're just locking and loading it again. It kind of sucks. I don't like that. Now, the place where this is awesome, like, not just like kind of a little, like, okay, but fantastic, is if prototype is a common thing. Because the Phyrexian Flesh Gorger, for example, is one I keep mentioning. We're going to get to it when we talk about black cards. So I'm going to give you my full take on that card when we get there. But it is a prototype creature that is its prototype cost is 1 black, and you get a 3/3 with some bonuses. Its main casting cost is 7. So if you cast it as your 3-drop, which you absolutely can, I Soul Partition it. There's a ward I need to pay through, but let's say I do that and blast it with Soul Partition. It's now exiled. They lost their 3-drop. It's gone. And in order to cast it again, they need to add 2 more to it. If I'm not mistaken, now they may be able to cast it for its prototype cost, which would be a little bit of a bummer. But I don't. Actually, I need to look that up now. Because if they are not able to cast it for the prototype cost, they have to pay 9 for it, which would be pretty fantastic. And basically removes it from the game. Yeah. Oh, you know what? This doesn't say cast. It says play. You may play it. So, to be honest, I think they can probably still use the prototype cost. So, never mind. Actually, I think this card is fine. It buys you 1 turn. So, if your opponent's attacking you, you can exile a thing, and it's gone for a minute, and then they'll probably replay it the next turn. That's okay. You know, if a Shell Dread is online and it's going to kill you, this helps you buy some time, which is something. But in that case, I would rather have Fateful Absence. The fact this can hit any non-land permanent is interesting. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. There's some kind of interesting jank with this. I can tell. Like I can feel it. There is something you can do with this. The other thing I'm thinking of is if you target your own permanents. If you hit one of your own prototype creatures, for example. If it's very late in the game and you have a ton of mana, you can hit one of your own prototype creatures and cast it for its full cost. If you can pay its full cost +2, and you would get any cast triggers in addition to everything else going on. So, I don't know. But in the end, I don't think this is worth a rare. I think this could have been uncommon. I would have been okay with that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't love it. Yeah, this is one of those, I'm doing the opposite of what I was doing earlier. The more I read this, the less I like it. Anyway. All right, next up. We got Static Net, 3 and a white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Static Net leaves the battlefield. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life and create a tap Power Stone token. It's an Oblivion Ring style enchantment. If you are really looking for these, then fine, it does the thing. It produces the Power Stone, which is not nothing, but meh? Like, I don't know. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed. For 4 mana, I want this to do more. Or I want it to only cost 3. It's clearly... They clearly made it cost 4 because of the Power Stone token, which is fine, but I don't think that's good enough. I don't think that gives you enough to merit the cost difference. Meanwhile, Dominator United gave us Prayer of Binding, which is an enchantment for 3 and a white with flash that does the exact same thing, even down to gaining you 2 life. The only thing this doesn't give you is the Power Stone token, but you can cast it at instant speed. That flash is worth so much more than a Power Stone token. I genuinely cannot imagine a scenario where I would put Static Net in my deck over Prayer of Binding. I would love to be wrong on that, or I would love to be proven wrong about that, but I just don't. I don't see it. All right. Next up, we've got Survivor of Corliss. Survivor of Corliss. This is a 1/1 4/1 human soldier with first strike, 1 and a white, exile Survivor of Corliss from your graveyard, scry 2. Now, this is a common, and it kind of reads like it. Like, it's fine. I think first strike's a big deal. I like first strike a lot. It is a highly underrated keyword that is capable of delivering some really cool impacts. If you're in a situation where you are buffing your team with King Darien, or the Soldier Lord from Dominator United, if you're running those kinds of effects where the Survivor of Corliss is going to grow, then all of a sudden I think this card is excellent, because a 1/1 with first strike is fine but not great. 2/2 with first strike is pretty good. Your opponent definitely has to worry about it. The moment you have like 3 or 4 power with the first strike, your opponent can almost not even attack. And that's it. And we're talking about if just the Survivor grows. If you go turn 1, Survivor of Corliss, turn 2, Thalia, you now have 3 first strike power on board on turn 2. Your opponent can't attack you with a 3 toughness creature, because you can just double block, it dies on first strike damage, your team is completely untouched. That is rad. Like, so having a 1/1 first striker for 1 with other relevant synergies within that deck is awesome. And the fact that it also gives you a bonus, if it does die in the early game, you can exile from your graveyard and scry 2. So it is an effect you can leverage from the graveyard later while also having a relevant body at the beginning. I think human decks are gonna like this, soldier decks are gonna like it too. Like, it's a good 1-drop. And aggressive decks like that need good 1-drops. And we have multiple in this set, and that's awesome. All right, next up, Thopter Architect. This is a human artificer, 2/3 for 3 and a white. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gains flying until end of turn. This is interesting. This is interesting because we have a lot of situations where multiple artifacts can enter the battlefield quickly, including things like Power Stone tokens. So I was just talking about how Power Stone tokens are not great. And they're not great, but they trigger this. However, the other thing that triggers this is those artifact soldier tokens. So if we're in a situation where we have like Myrel, right, where if you attack, you create X soldier tokens that happen to be artifacts, all of a sudden that plus Thopter Architect, you attack with Myrel and all your other soldiers, you then create a number of soldiers equal to the number of soldiers you have. All the ones you just created are artifacts. Your whole team lifts off and they're all flying now. That rules. Like, that's just sweet. So I kind of like this. I like this idea a lot. Yeah, it's actually pretty decent. It's decent. That said, this does suffer from a very real problem in that it is a setup card that costs 4. So your entire board has to be kind of locked and loaded and ready to take advantage of this so it can drop and fire. You need to be able to use it right away. If you have something that can produce artifacts easily on the board already, and then like you play this, create the artifacts, lift off the squad and swing, it's pretty good. Like, it's pretty good. It's asking a lot. There are a lot of hoops to jump through. The fact that the soldier deck is creating soldier artifact creatures in addition to power stones and everything else is very relevant. That's very relevant. I think that's going to help with a lot. But all in all, I think the Outdoor Architect is interesting. Probably not great, but it's interesting. I like it. All right. Next up, Tocasia's Welcome. This is an enchantment for 2 and a white. Whenever one or more creatures with mana value 3 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. This reminds me very much of Welcoming Vampire, which is already a card that sees play in a lot of decks. Now, you get a flying body in that case, and it also keys off of power, which is relevant because there are some setup creatures that have low power but like cool statics that you might want to be playing that can trigger Welcoming Vampire. All right, fair enough. Now, Tocasia's Welcome, however, keys off of mana value regardless of what you have going on. So if I'm in a situation where I'm going to be buffing my squad with like Anthem-style effects, those usually turn off the Welcoming Vampire later on. They don't turn off Tocasia's Welcome because they don't modify the mana base or the mana value. So that's pretty cool. In fact, I just think this card's actually not bad. It's a good setup piece. I think a lot of commander decks are going to like this a lot. And I can totally see this seeing play in standard. One of the problems with aggro decks, one of the problems with aggro decks is that you run out of cards. Now, is this going to be better than Welcoming Announcement? No. Because Welcoming Announcement, if you're attacking, you're drawing cards at least for the first couple of turns. That's really good. You can also use cards like Reckon or Bankbuster right now to just pump out some cards and get a beat stick for later. Also very good. Is Tocasia's Welcome as good as those? I don't think so, to be completely honest. Now, Wedding Announcement stops giving you cards eventually. Tocasia's Welcome does not, and that's awesome. And every time you create a token, it draws you a card. Well, once a turn. So you can take advantage of this to pretty good effect. It's possible to refill your hand. If you have one of these on the battlefield and you're running that mana value 3 or less deck, because that's an effect. I mean, that's a synergy that there's a lot of support for. You're not going to run out of cards. And that's nice. I like that. So I think this card's pretty good. I think Wedding Announcement is still going to be the go-to for the 3-drop slot in that kind of a mid-range deck. But there might be a case. There might be a case for this. All right, next up. Union of the Third Path. This is an instant for 2 and a white. Draw a card. Then you gain life equal to the number of cards in your hand. This is not good. Straight up, it's just not good. It is a cantrip, meaning that it does draw you a card, which is fine. You need to have a lot of cards in your hand for this to be decent, but even then, all it's doing is gaining you life. Like, incidental life gain is good. Devoting cards in your deck to gaining you life, I like a lot less. I can see this being decent in a commander-style deck that is dedicated to drawing cards. If you have cards like Consecrated Sphinx, Rhystic Study, the kind of situation where you end up with 15 to 20 cards in your hand all the time, this could be very powerful in that kind of a context. In competitive Magic, I don't see this doing anything. This is revitalize, but too expensive, is what I see here. So, yeah. No, I don't want to spend 3 mana to cycle and gain 3 life or whatever, or for even 4 or 5. It's just not good enough. All right, next up, Warlord's Elite. 4/4 for 3 human soldier, 2 and a white. As an additional cost to cast this spell, tap 2 untapped artifacts, creatures, and or lands you control. So, worst case scenario, this is a 4/4 for 5. However, it has like quasi-improvise, which is actually pretty cool. If you have artifacts lying around, such as Power Stones or things like that, that's the thing. You cannot use the Power Stone mana to pay for that casting cost. However, you can tap Power Stones to satisfy the additional cost of this spell. That's pretty neat. I like that. But otherwise, you could also like invoke, where you could tap creatures for it, or you could just tap lands. Like you could tap 2 additional lands, you get a 4/4 for 5. That's fine. Like, it's not great, but it's fine. The other thing that's nice, you can tap creatures that are summoning sick for this. So if you have a situation where you have multiple creatures down already, and maybe you're using like a rabble-rousing situation or a Myrel that we were looking at earlier, Myrel, that's producing tokens upon attacks, you can use those tokens to pay for this, which is kind of neat. Like, there's some cool synergy there. Decent card, and it's a human soldier. Again, human soldiers, not bad. Now, do I want to devote deck slots to this? Not necessarily, because most of the time, you're going to be getting Like most of the time, you're gonna be cast out like a 1-drop, you know, 1-drop creature. Then turn 2 is gonna roll around. You're gonna cast down a 2-drop creature. You're gonna attack with your 1-drop creature. Turn 3. Well, most of the time I want to be attacking with the creatures that I just played. If I want to play my Warlord's Elite on turn 3, I'm gonna have to tap those creatures, so we miss out on some of that damage. Now we get a big body that we can work with, so that might be worth it, to be honest. But I have reservations, you know? I could be completely wrong on this. This could be an absolute bomb, because getting a 4/4 down on turn 3 is a big deal. Being able to race your opponent that effectively is strong. Being able to attack with a 4/4 on turn 4 is a big deal. If you can get that down consistently, this is gonna be great. This is gonna be really good. Note, you cannot tap enchantments to sacrifice that, or to satisfy that clause, so that's a factor. It's kind of a bummer. Like, I really wish I could use small enchantments, or even like tapping auras, but that would obviously be pretty cheeky. In any event, I think it's a cool card. I think Warlord's Elite is very interesting. There are definitely ways to take advantage of this. Oh, I just realized another thing. While it is oftentimes going to be your 5-drop, it also is a creature with mana value 3 or less. So you can hit this with a recommission. You can hit this off of Collected Company, or that, you know, those Collected Company style effects that we've been looking at so far. So that's pretty great. Also, patch up is still a thing from SNC. So the fact that it costs 3 actually makes it a viable player to some of those decks. So interesting idea. Anyway. Next up, Yodian Mechanic. This is a 1/4 for 3, 2 and a white, with lifelink. Human Cleric Soldier. 1/4 lifelinker for 3. Human Cleric Soldier. If you care about humans, soldiers, or clerics, you can certainly consider this. But I will be absolutely shocked if you don't have a better play on your 3-drop slot. This is a common like draft type where they have like a low power, high toughness creature with lifelink. That's becoming very popular, and I don't like it. Like, I don't think this is particularly good. In a draft format where you have like a deck synergizing around one of those types, like if you're drafting the soldier deck, this is fine as like a mid to late draft pickup. Like, it's fine. I don't love it, but you can do worse. You know, but like in constructed, I don't see this seeing a lick of play. I'll be absolutely shocked. Please, I challenge you. Randomly pair up against me on the ladder on Arena and beat me with this card. I would love to see it. I would give you so many props, you have no idea. But I don't think it's gonna happen. All right, next up. By the way, if you want a chance to pair up against me on the ladder, keep an eye out on Twitch, twitch.tv/hammox42 when I'm live. I stream with 0 delay, so you can tell when I queue up. Just saying. Anyway, next up, Autonomous Assembler. 4/5, Vigilance for 5. With pay 1, tap, put a +1/+1 counter on target assembly worker you control. But wait, it also has Prototype for 1 and a white, and you get a 2/2 with Vigilance in that ability. That ability is actually shockingly great. Like, don't sleep on that ability. I think it's very good. Assembly Worker is a creature type that is not uncommon in Magic. It is one that appears on a bunch of different cards, and it's fun. It's just really fun. And in this case, it's on a Vigilant body. So you play this out on turn 2. You have a 2/2 Vigilant creature. You attack with it. Before damage, you pay 1, tap, put a +1/+1 counter on it. You now have a tapped 3/3 Assembly Worker. You can do that every single turn where you have 1 mana lying around, and all of a sudden this thing can get really big really fast. And if you top deck it later in the game, you pay 5, you drop it as a 4/5. You still got the Vigilant, all that action, you can get to keep doing the thing. I think this is really good. This is a great example of a very flexible creature that is capable of doing some really good stuff. And if you have other assembly workers, you can even spread the counters around, which is pretty cool. I know there are a number of lands that turn into like assembly worker creatures. So I think one of them is in this set. I could be wrong, but I think there is one that's going to be entering standard that can synergize with this. So this is really nice. This thing rules. I'm a big fan. Yeah, I mean, it's a 2-drop. It's a 2-drop assembly worker that buffs assembly workers. What more do you need? All right, next up, Combat Thresher. I love the idea of weaponizing a combine like this. If you have ever been out on a farm and have had an opportunity to actually see those machines in motion, they are incredibly powerful. And the idea of one of those bearing down on you on the battlefield is freaking awesome. Yeah, Combat Thresher. I don't want to mess with this thing. So it's a construct, uncommon, for 7 for a 3/3 double striker. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. But wait, you can also prototype it for 2 and a white for a 1/1 double striker that when it ETBs draw a card. It's kind of like a big spiriting companion, a little bit, but it doesn't count as a 3-drop creature for the sake of synergies because the main mana value is 7. So you can't like recommission this thing, which is kind of a bummer. Like you can't target it with that style of like cheap reanimation. That sucks. It does. But a double strike is a big deal. Double strike is an incredibly powerful ability. And being able to get anybody on board that you can then apply combat tricks to or equip stuff to that gives it, any kind of boost. This is actually really good. Like I can see myself running like Eater of Virtue in this. Because then you would get a 3/1 double striker that when it enters, you drew a card that you can be attacking with on turn 4. Like, that's 6 damage. It's actually pretty tough to kill. Like, that's not bad. I think this thing's actually pretty decent. Again, these prototype creatures are very flexible, and that's awesome. Now, the fact that it's only a 3/3, like, if you were to reanimate this with something bigger, like one of the, like the recharge and, what is it, recommission, recharge, or whatever it is, or like an Invoke Justice or something like that. Actually, Invoke Justice is great because it gives you the counters, so never mind. That would be awesome. Yeah, that's the bottom line. I want this in a deck that can buff its stats. If I'm in a deck that is putting +1/+1 counters on things, or is like using Glorious Anthem style effects, I want this card. Because if it's super late in the game, it can come down as a 3/3, great. But 9 times out of 10, I'm casting it for 3. And we're just drawing a card, and we're drawing a card when it enters, and we got a double strike body that we can do stuff with. I think a lot of people are going to get wrecked by this. I think this card is shockingly good. All right, next up, Platoon Dispenser. I love that name. It is a 4/6 artifact creature construct for 5. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more other creatures, draw a card. And then you can pay 4, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token, and it unearths for 4. That first ability is where the money is. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more other creatures, draw a card. Now, being able to just pay 4 and just poop out a soldier artifact could be good. It's a good mana sink if you have like Power Stone mana lying around, or if you've ramped your eyeballs, you have ways to just throw mana into this and just pump out stuff. Cool. Like, that's all fine and good. The fact that you draw a card at the end of every end step where you control this and 2 other creatures. If you have 3 creatures on board, and this is one of them, you draw cards at your end step. That's awesome. Like, that's really awesome. Don't be sleeping on that. It's also a 4/6 for 5, and you can unearth it even. So if it ends up in your graveyard, you can bring it back, draw a card at your end step, and, like, it only costs you 4 to unearth a 4/6. Like, that if your opponent doesn't remove in some way, you draw a card off of. This card is just good value. Like, if I'm going wide, this is kind of exactly what I want. Like, I like this thing. I like this thing a lot. All right, I'm definitely going to be taking advantage of that. All right, next up, we have Scrapwork Cohort. This is a 3/1 artifact creature soldier for 4 generic. When Scrapwork Cohort enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token, and it unearths for 3. So a 1/1 and a 3/1 for 4 is not amazing, but they are both soldier artifacts. So if those are synergies that we're already leveraging, this actually could be okay. And on top of that is an ETB. The 1/1 soldier artifact creature token is upon entering the battlefield. So if you have any way to blink this, if you're using Golden Argosy, if you're using Planner Incision or Touch the Spirit Realm, those kind of effects that can blink this and bring it back, you have an opportunity to just pump out a bunch of these little soldier tokens and potentially trigger a bunch of other things throughout the course of the game. So a 3/1 for 4 is not good. But you can also unearth it for 2 and a white. So you get it coming and going, and it leaves another token behind. I actually think this is pretty decent. Like, as a common, this is shockingly playable. So if you're using anything with blinks, if you care about artifacts, if you care about soldiers,
2 artifacts for 1 card is good. Like, I don't think this is amazing. I don't think I'm gonna run it in a lot of my decks, but as like a 2 in that artifact deck, I can see. All right, next up, Steel Seraph. That's right, we got Metal Angels, everybody. It's happening. All right, so this is a 5/4 flying angel for 6. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains your choice of flying, vigilance, or lifelink until end of turn. And you can prototype it for 1 white, and you get a 3/3 flyer with that text on it. I like this. I like this. All right, so 3/3 for 3, and it's also an angel. This synergizes with Giada. If you are running an angel deck and you are running, so you can throw Giada on 2, Steel Seraph on 3, it comes out as a 4/4. You can give Giada, who already has flying and vigilance, lifelink, gain some extra life. Nice, why not? And then all of a sudden, like, do additional stuff from there. Like, I like this card. It scales really nicely too. It's a 5/4 for 6 if you're playing it for its generic main mana cost. But otherwise, you get a 3/3 flyer for 3 with all kinds of good stuff, with just good stuff. It can also target itself with that ability, by the way. So if you're in a situation where you need it back to block, on combat, you can give it vigilance. Like, you can give it self-vigilance or lifelink. That's actually really good. It's just good. This card's great. Like, straight up great. All right, next up, Tocasia's Amulet. I have absolutely no idea what an amulet is. I'm guessing it is some kind of beast of burden or some kind of, like, load-bearing machine based on the artwork. Anyway, it's a 4/4 construct artifact creature for 5. When it leaves the battlefield, you gain 2 life and it unearths for 4. I don't see a world where this is constructed playable. The unearth is relevant. Only gaining 2 life is not that big of a benefit, and it's a 4/4 for 5. It just, the stats aren't where it's at. It costs too much. The unearth is nice. Being able to, for 4 mana, pull a 4/4 out of your graveyard and swing with it, and then gain 2 life when it dies, is theoretically pretty cool, but I don't like it. And yeah, I don't see it. I don't think this card's very good. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. They can't all be bangers. Speaking of bangers, Urza Sylex, baby. Legendary artifact for 3. You can pay 2 white, tap. Exile Urza Sylex. Each player chooses 6 lands they control. Destroy all other permanents, activate only as a sorcery. When Urza Sylex is put into exile from the battlefield, you may pay 2. If you do, search your library for a Planeswalker card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. In a situation where you're in a control matchup, or if you're in a controlling deck where you want to prevent your opponent from popping off, this does the trick. On top of that, this does my favorite thing in my hosers or in my removal, in that your opponent sees it coming. Now, you would think that is a massive downside. You would really think that is a massive downside. However, go with me here. If your opponent is playing aggro and they do not have artifact removal in hand, you play this down on 3. You pass to your opponent. They have an option. They have the option of committing more to the board and swinging. You know, well, they're probably going to swing either way if they're playing aggro. But they have the opportunity to either put more on the board knowing that you've got a trigger right here that can blow the whole thing up, or they hold cards in their hand and play around it. If they hold cards in their hand, don't pop it. It's that simple. If they hold cards in their hand, just sit on it. And maybe pick off other stuff with little one-off removals or counterspells or whatever. But, like, just leave it. Just, like, let it sit. And if they don't force you to pop it right away, you can also pay a little bit extra and go grab a powerful Planeswalker out of your deck and just be locked and loaded with that. Wandering Emperors, Tezzeret, if you're, you know, taking advantage of artifact synergies, that kind of thing, can be really fantastic. And all of a sudden, like, I dig it. Like, so this drops on 3. It puts them in a really tough bind where they have to do something. And on top of that, if your opponent is land ramping super hard, this punishes them really badly. If they get 5 or 6 additional lands on the, you know, that's probably a bit much. But if they get like 2 or 3 additional lands on the battlefield, the moment you have 6 lands, you can pop this, go grab a Planeswalker, and you are unaffected. Like, your non-land permanents are destroyed if you have any, but your opponent's board is just wrecked. Like, it's all wrecked. I love it. I think this card's really cool. And the fact that it can hit massive, like one comparison that I've seen made is Urza's Sylex and Karn's Sylex. I want to take a second to compare the two. Now, Karn's Sylex is a very interesting card. It is also a legendary artifact for 3. ETB's tapped. Players can't pay life or to cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. Pay X, tap, exile Karn's Sylex, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X or less. Both are good cards that both accomplish similar goals of being able to blow the board up. The main difference with Karn's Sylex, if I want to hit a Titan Industry with this, I somehow need to pump 7 mana into this. Which, in a situation where we have Power Stones and all that crap lying around, that might not be that hard, but all the same, if I'm creating a bunch of tokens, I don't want to be popping this. but I have to make a bunch of tokens in order to pop this into the big stuff. Urza Sylex, however, just pay 4, blow it all up. It's all gone. That's what I want to see. So, I dig it. I can dig it. All right. But yeah, Urza Sylex, I think it's good. I just think this card's good. Decent board wipe. And it can tutor. That's nice. All right, next up. Veteran's Power Blade. This is an artifact equipment for 3. Equip creatures +2/+0. And it equips for 2, or you can equip a soldier for 1 white. This is wanting to be relevant in the soldier deck. Spoiler warning, it isn't. This is just draft equipment 101. This is like generic okay draft sword go. That's all this is. I don't think it's very good at all. It's +2/+0. It's like, this is a garbage Bone Splinters. Not Bone Splinter, sorry. Bone Splitter. Bone Splitter. Yeah. Bone Splitter, one of the, wow, there's a Bone Splitter sliver? I had no idea. Anyway, Bone Splitter, classic artifact. This was actually in the first set. It was in Mirrodin, the OG Mirrodin, when equipment was introduced. +2/+0 for 1, equips for 1, boom. It's an axe. It makes your thing hit harder. It does the thing. Veteran's Power Blade, it gives the exact same effect, but it costs way more. Costing 3 to put on the battlefield and 2 to equip. Even if I'm equipping soldiers, it's still not great. Anyway, but if I'm not equipping soldiers, this is like unplayable. Anyway, next up, Yodian Frontliner. This is a 1/1/4/1 artifact creature soldier. I love the artifact soldiers. This is just so cool. Whenever Yodian Frontliner attacks another target creature you control, gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and it unearths for 1 white. If I'm in a soldier deck and I want a 1-drop soldier, frankly, we have a lot of them already. But if we already have like the 1/1 first striker we were looking at earlier and the 2/1 recruitment officer, we have those in the deck already, and we would like more 1/1s, or we would like more 1-drops in an aggressive deck like this. Actually, like, that's not bad. Like, you know, this does fit, and we might need it. The unearth is also very relevant. When your opponent wipes the board, being able to respond by pulling your creature out of the graveyard and swinging with it makes a big difference. This could be the difference. I mean, actually, think about it. If we're in an Orzhov situation, we have Yodian Frontliner and Tenacious Underdog in the bin at the exact same time. We spend 5 mana, 1 of which is white, 2 of which is black. We have a Yodian Frontliner and T-Dog online at the same time. Swing with both. That is 5 damage that just came out of our graveyard because Yodian Frontliner buffs up the Tenacious Underdog. So this is bringing you 2 power back, and then T-Dog draws your card. So, you know, cool. Like, that's kind of a unique situation, but what do you need in order to pull that off? You need Frontliner and Tenacious Underdog in the graveyard. You need 5 mana available in a combination of black and white. It's not that hard. Like, and situations like that would be very easy to do. And frankly, there are plenty of other unearthed creatures in this set that you could be unearthing alongside the Frontliner to get in for that damage after your opponent has wiped the board, which is pretty cool. Also, a lot of wipes these days are destroy effects. You know, there are a lot, like the Sylexes we were just looking at, both destroy effects. There are plenty of like target player sacrifice effects, like Liliana, those kind of things, all of which put stuff in your graveyard. That's great. There are a couple of exile effects out there. Don't get me wrong, they exist. You know, Wandering Emperor didn't go anywhere. That's straight up exiles. You've got Farewell, which if Farewell hits you, not only does it exile, it also gets your graveyard out of here on the way. So, you know, that's a thing. But aside from stuff like that, these kind of strategies where you're going aggressive, Yodian Frontliner actually could fit in as a solid little 1-drop that just does the job. I like that. That's actually kind of cool. I dig it. And that actually brings us to the final card. Now, this was an hour 40 minutes, and this was only covering the white cards from Brothers War. I will be filming more of these set review videos in the coming days. So keep an eye on the channel. If you enjoyed this very long, very, I hope, insightful ramble into the white cards in the Brothers War, please subscribe to the channel so you see when I post the next one. So in the next couple of days, I'm going to be going around the color wheel like I mentioned at the top. We are going to be doing blue next. So I'm looking forward to that very, very much. And yeah, thank you so much for checking out the video, and thank you for making it to the end. It means the absolute world. I will catch you on the next one.